This is Dateline News and Conversations. At the outset, I'd like to remind everybody to please subscribe to the Friends of Crimea, Friends of Russia Telegram channel. The link to that channel is posted at the end of the show, and I will post it in post-production. But it's Friends of Crimea, Friends of Russia Telegram channel, where you can find an aggregation of all the important news pertaining to Russia and what's happening geopolitically in the world. Now, the topic tonight is one that is dear to my heart. It's entitled The Manipulators and the Manipulated. My guest tonight, he's returning. He's a polyglot. He speaks and understands several languages, including Russian and Ukrainian. And he gets his information from Ukrainian sources. And he also does a daily Substack article report with a lot of news. But what you will find there, you won't find anywhere else, is a daily report of the missile strikes, daily missile strikes that have continued in Ukraine by Russia since October 10th of last year, after they blew up a section of the bridge at Kerch. So my guest tonight, he's returning, Don Hank from Panama. Don, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Regis. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's good to have you and good to see you again. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your daily reports. Like you and a lot of other people, we get bombarded with all this analysis and speculation by experts, some of them very good and credible, but you are the only one, to my knowledge, who is reporting daily on the missile strikes to all the oblasts in Ukraine. So let's start first with the article, The Manipulators and the Manipulated. First of all, why did you decide to write that? And then we'll talk about it.
Well, I had a nudge from somebody who contacts me once in a while. And it's a very manipulated person. I think there's something, wrong with this guy. But he really repeats the talking points from the New York Times, from Biden, and he says he doesn't like Biden. See, these people who think they're conservative, but they don't like Biden, but they agree with Biden on the war because we have to hate Russia. It's our duty to hate Russia. I think that's what subliminally. I think that's where it's at.
Yeah, well, this has been something that's been on my mind for many years now, since I've been doing the kind of film work that I've been doing. I've encountered people who just cannot accept the truth that they see right in front of them, not only in my films and videos, but what they see happening in and around the world. And somehow they can block it out. I don't get it. Mm-hmm. So let's talk first now about who are the manipulators and why does what they're doing work so well?
Yeah, I wish I knew why it works so well. The manipulators, I like to think that their headquarters is Washington, D.C., but they're all over the place. They're the different so-called news outlets, put them in quotes. And the main message is that you got to hate Russia. You can't trust those guys. They're sinister. They're out to get us, and they want to take over the whole world. That's the story. And they're making it work. They're making Americans believe that. Although I like to think that that's changing slightly, as you said, the narrative is changing. But
So, Don, like, who are these people? I mean, I don't think these people are Anthony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Joseph Biden, uh, even Victoria the Witch Nuland. If she comes to visit your country, duck for cover because all kinds of hell are going to break out.
yeah,
But
unless
there
unless you're
has to be
nightmare.
there, there has to be a puppet master or puppet masters. Do you have any idea who they might be? Because I do.
Yeah, well, I wrote about that too. Uh, I wrote about the State Department, and I said it's the most dangerous terror organization in the world. Uh, Not exaggerating in the least. And I wrote about this organization called. It's a group of people, and coincidentally, now this is just a coincidence. They just happen to be Jews. Okay. In fact, I didn't even say that. But Newland is one of them. And I have an article about that, but I'd have to bring that up and review and see who those people were. But they're pretty much running our foreign policy. And that's the State Department.
Yeah. I will add what I think about that. I think there are people in IPAC, this very powerful and wealthy Jewish political action committee that has done a great deal to influence American foreign policy. We're not making this up. This has been public. It's all kinds of people have written articles about it. Even the mainstream media talk about it. Maybe not in a negative light, but they talk about it. You mentioned the United States State Department. Everywhere there's a US embassy, you will find the CIA.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And you and I both know the CIA has been at this manipulating probably since their inception in 1945. They have become experts at manipulating. Brainwashing is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
The American public through the use of media, not only in the United States, but around the world. It's well known that they plant people and they pay people to publish stories that they send them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think we also have to think about MI6
Mm-hmm.
in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
These people work hand in hand with the CIA and whoever those people are that are controlling IPAC.
Mm-hmm.
They are the ones who create the message. And I know you'll agree with me. Why is it so powerful? Because it's everywhere, everywhere. Radio, television, Hollywood, in our movies and television shows. It's everywhere, and it's non-stop. Your thoughts on that? Do you agree?
Oh yeah. 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 APAC is a big mover and shaker. And they seem to be centered around the narrative that we call the Odin Yinon plan, which was based on something that was published in Hebrew back in the 80s by a guy by the name of Oded Yinon. And this guy talked about the Greater Israel, which is a lot of territory. This is a lot of real estate in Middle East, and they want it all. But they're taking it incrementally. The idea of that is that we must break up countries that could possibly be a threat to Israel. Now, they're not a threat. Even Iran is not a threat to Israel. Israel is the threat, not Iran. We need to get that straight. But because it's there, it's like the Mount Everest. Because it's there, it's going to do us harm. That's their idea, and that's a very dangerous. It's the most dangerous possible concept, and it's the main concept of the State Department. We think that this country could do harm, yeah, and then this. Speaking of the movers and shakers, Paul Wolfowitz, in 1992, I believe, he came out with his just an amazing piece of writing where he said that countries like even the former Soviet Union is a very dangerous place. China's dangerous. All these countries that have too much territory and too many resources are dangerous. They're going to hurt us, which is a lie. It's just a plain lie. They're not going to hurt us unless we hurt them first, and that's what's going on in Ukraine. We hurt them first. So Paul Wolfowitz is on that list. He's one of the guys behind the curtain, and that became our military doctrine. The Wolfowitz doctrine is our military doctrine today. It should have, and the amazing thing is, if this came out in 1992, which was, I believe, 1 year after the Soviet Union fell. So we didn't believe that it fell. We didn't care if it fell or not, because we never believed that communism was the problem. America never believed that. That is when I say America, I'm talking about these people headquartered, the Satanists headquartered in Washington. They never believed that communism was a problem. They believed that Russia is the problem. And, starting with the Korean War, when they say, oh, well, we must prevent the spread of godless communism. And of course, they were playing on the nerves of the evangelicals and also some Catholics. They all bought into it. The pastors are our worst enemy. The pastors are dangerous. The priests and the pastors, these people are all very dangerous, because I remember when I was just a kid, and there would be different. We were always at war with somebody, and the pastor would stand up there and pray, and he would say, "Lord, keep and protect our men in uniform." Back then it was just men. And he never would dare, no pastor would ever dare to say, "And please protect those poor kids in those grass huts that are being bombed." Yeah. So what does that have to do with God? What does that have to do with the teachings of Jesus? Nothing. We put country first and God next. We talk about God and country. We don't believe in God. We believe in the country. And we want the country to obey God, not the other way around. Our country has to obey the rules-based order, or else. If we could take God, I think if Washington could take God to the Hague court, the criminal court, they'd do it. They'd sue it.
You made a good point about priests and pastors. Now, I was a priest for 14 years, really, and I never knew anybody who was influenced or programmed by the CIA, the State Department. But I can tell you what, since I was a young kid, in all of our churches and everywhere I've been in the United States, there was a papal flag on one side and an American flag on the other. And we were all praying for the defeat of communism.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lady of Fatima predicted that communism would fall.
Oh.
And so this is kind of how we got brainwashed that way, thinking that Russia, the Soviet Union, were evil, the evil empire.
Yeah.
But I also want to point out, now, I'm 78 years old, and ever since I can remember, in church, in all of our civic events, parades, remembrances of the fallen soldiers in World War II, the Korean War, in all of our 4th of July celebrations. And in our history books, in school, the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States of America, the flag for which it stands. I mean, this was totally saturated in everything that we all grew up with. And it's been going on, as I said, ever since I was a small child. I recall these things. I never thought there was anything wrong with it. I grew up to be a patriotic American. So what we're really talking about, I want to get back to that, is how we have been manipulated.
Yeah.
And it wasn't by accident. We know that. It was not by accident. Let's shift gears now. And we've just alluded to how they do it, why they do it, because they have an agenda. But when I asked you, why does it work so well? Give it a second thought. Why do you think all of this has worked so well?
Because they planted the seed and we were fertile soil. Particularly the Christians. Christians are really suckers for this stuff. I have an article on Christian Zionism. I don't know if I talked about that on our last meeting, but the Christian Zionists believe that Israel is holy, but not just the land. Oh no, the Holy Land is holy, and so are its people, and so are the Knesset and the Likud party, and especially Netanyahu. I ran into a lady online who said that she thought that Netanyahu was a Christian because our propaganda makes it seem that way. He's right in line with us in every possible way, so he must be a Christian too. Of course, they just made a law that you're not allowed to talk about Jesus in Israel, or you go to jail, literally go to jail, talking about Jesus. So we don't believe that anyway. No matter what horrible things they do, we just say, no, that's not true. That's propaganda. That's Satan lying to us about this holy country and its holy government. We're fertile ground for the seeds that they plant.
Yeah. I'd like to point out that I'm not anti-Semite. I'm not anti-Jew or anti-Jewish religion. There's a big difference between Judaism and Zionism. I don't want to delve into that right now on this show, but I want to make it clear that I don't think either you or I are anti-Semite. We're talking about another very powerful force masquerading itself under the cover of the Jewish religion. And, you know, as you mentioned, they've been very effective. Now, let's talk a little bit about us, the manipulated. I think all of us have been manipulated. We have believed it. And some people, for most of their lives, like me, I only began to figure it out in 2012. And it came from a shock, an incredible, overwhelming experience. In my case, when I went to South Korea and Jeju Island, and I saw for the first time the truth about what the United States was doing and what United States foreign policy was all about, it took that kind of a shock. But let's talk about now those who have been manipulated, you and I included, and let's talk about not everybody is locked into this totally manipulated category. There are some people who begin to see, maybe not through an extraordinary experience like I had, but began to see and feel that things are just not right.
Mhm.
You wrote about this. Why is it that some people, when they begin to see the truth, just cannot and do not dare to speak out?
Mhm. Yeah, in the article you're talking about, I did mention the skeptics, people who are skeptical, but I said that being skeptical can be something private. You're not talking about it, but you have this doubt in your mind. But I said when you take it to the next step, as you and I have done, uh, you become a dissident. You start as a skeptic, then you become a dissident, and a dissident is a skeptic on steroids. He's talking about it, and he's trying to buttonhole other people to join him in his skepticism. But I something I omitted in that article, and I've been kicking myself because I want to rewrite that. This there are the manipulators and the manipulated, but most manipulated are manipulators as well. We go along with it, and we buttonhole other people. We try to make them believe it as we do, and that's what this guy that I was talking about online, who really inspired me to write the article.
Yeah. And you made a very good point. You said the manipulators, some of them are manipulated. And I can tell you who some of them are: Anthony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, many of these people that are in the State Department, in the White House, surrounding not just Biden, but before him, uh, Trump, before him, Obama, before him, Bush and Cheney and the rest of them.
Mhm.
These people have absolutely believed the lie, and now they have become the manipulators, manipulated themselves. Now, I like what you talked about. People can become skeptic, but it's private. Tell me why they keep it private. What are your thoughts on why some people who know, who are skeptical, don't speak out?
Well, mostly they want to keep their jobs. They want to get along with their family and their friends. I think that's probably the main reasons. They know that what they're being told is a lie. But what are you going to do? You've got to get along. You've got to make a buck. You've got to support your family. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I know people as you do, uh, who I know well, who are very bright, very intelligent, well read, and well traveled,
Hmm.
that have two things they have to maintain. The first, I don't know which comes first or second, but one is the job, and the second is their reputation in social and civic and business circles. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very powerful. Now, I mentioned in my case that it took a very transformative experience working on that film, my first major film, The Ghost of Jeju, to open my eyes, and my eyes were opened immediately. And I recognized that everything I had been taught and learned about Russia and really the world was a lie.
Hmm.
And my undergraduate degree was in United States non-history. We never learned history, we learned United States propaganda.
Yeah.
And so for you, were you always skeptical? Did you have a particular experience that opened your eyes? I'm really curious as to know from a personal point of view how you arrived.
I think maybe I am a born skeptic. Uh, in I think it was ninth grade, there was a hypnotist who came to our school, and he gave a show. He took a lot of people out of the audience, to come up to the stage and sit there and be hypnotized. And I was one of them. I was the only one who wasn't hypnotized. And I was so embarrassed. I really, really wanted to be hypnotized, believe me. I was so embarrassed that I pretended I was hypnotized. And after the show, my friends came up and said, "You weren't hypnotized." So there's maybe a genetic factor there. I don't really know.
Yeah, I have some friends, not a lot, who would have described themselves just as you did. They were skeptical for some reason at a very early age. I wasn't. I was swallowing everything hook, line, and sinker. Good little Catholic boy from French-speaking family in French-speaking Central Maine, going through the seminary, just swallowed everything, just the whole thing. And then for a lot of years after, I did question things. The first Iraq War, I was against that. I questioned that. I didn't understand a number of things, but they didn't sit well. But you make a good point that you and some people are just born skeptics. They question the whole history of the United States. They question religion. They've left religion because they questioned it and it didn't make sense. Any number of things. So let's talk about now the dissidents. It's not easy being a dissident. I'm sure you know that. How have you experienced being a dissident? I'm curious.
Well, I know how you experienced it. It was a pretty rough deal because you lost all your YouTube account, if I understand that correctly. I had two blogs, lost them both. A guy like me can't have a blog. Although Substack has been very, very good to me so far. I don't know if it'll fall into the wrong hands someday, but Substack is the only thing I've ever found that will allow me to write whatever I want and to publish it. But well, what have I suffered as a result of my dissidence?
Yeah.
Well, this guy that I'm told you about, his sister got on my case on Facebook, but I think it was one of those back channels. I don't think anybody else could read it, but she said something about God is watching you. and she said, "You better change your attitude." So it's an attitude. It has nothing to do with what I know, right? None of the knowledge nothing that I know about Russia or Ukraine, that's not part. It's my attitude. I need to change my attitude. How do I put myself back in the toothpaste tube?
That's interesting. Have you lost any personal friends? Have you lost family?
I have lost some family, but I'm not sure it was because of that. I mean, it probably was because I gave up on religion early on and became an atheist for a few years. And then I decided there is a God after all. He wouldn't let all these bad things happen to me if there wasn't a God, But so, yeah, I lost some family. But I also had a very tolerant mom and dad, and they were very, very good. I cherish their memory. They were fundamentalists, as they say, fundamentalists. No dancing, no smoking, which is good. No booze, which is bad. No dancing and no cards. You couldn't play with a regular deck. You could play well, flinch. You could play flinch, but you couldn't play with this deck that because it has a Joker in it, and of course, we all know that the Joker is Satan.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, I need more than two hands to count the number of longtime close friends
Mhm.
that have disowned me. I'm
After
talking,
after
uh,
you were a priest.
well, when I left the priesthood, I found out who my friends were. When I was a
Uh,
priest, everybody was my friend. They love to have the priest come to dinner. They love to take you on, play golf with you on a country clubs. They love to take you on vacation with them.
you're the
Uh,
ticket to heaven.
yeah, yeah, and geez, when I left, I found out who my friends really were. But and then I was that time radicalized in terms of the whole church experience. And but many years went by before I my eyes were opened about the real untold history of the United States and my personal experience of that. And when I started telling people about it, when I started making my films, it's really interesting. On the one hand, some of these close personal friends immediately disowned me. But on the other hand, I traveled across the country on two trips with the Ghost of Jeju, which was really harsh on American history, the truth, and American foreign policy, and the plan for full spectrum dominance, hegemony of the entire world. I maybe on one or two occasions had somebody attack me, but I'm telling you, thousands of people in many, many different locations, small and bit larger, had their eyes opened
Mhm.
and actually became motivated and energized to spread the word.
That's great.
Now, I also showed it at a couple of large conventions of veterans in the United States. Incredibly, overwhelmingly embraced. They even helped fund my travel to go on these trips to these different places to document what Americans had been doing. And so it was very interesting. On the one hand, I've made tens of thousands of friends I don't even know around the world. But on the other hand, I've lost close personal friends. And I have to tell you, since making the films about Russia, coming here on three previous occasions, and living here now for 3.5 years, even my children can't accept it. Um, yeah, I got three grown children, five grandchildren, and they either think I'm a traitor or treasonous or that I've abandoned them. Um, yeah, so there's a price to pay for becoming, you call it a dissident, somebody countering the official narrative, somebody that's searching for the truth. And the truth is elusive. I don't believe I've found all of it, and I'm sure you haven't found all of it, but I think we're on the right track. Um, anyway, it's I'm glad to talk about this because I think it's talking about it like we are in a kind of this informal discussion is more appealing to some people than reading an article. A lot of people don't read anymore. They get their information from video and television, the movies, and so I really appreciate having this conversation. Now I want to move on to what I think is your greatest contribution to understanding what is happening in this war in Ukraine. You have been documenting since October of last year, every single day, the massive precision guided missile strikes all over Ukraine by the Russian military. First of all, the first question, I know you're not making it up. Where are you getting this information? first question. Where are you getting it?
Well, if you read the the links that I send, you'll find that maybe most of them are from RIA Novosti. Starts out with RIA, Novosti meaning news. That's where most of them come from. And I've been reading Novosti for I don't know how many years. Long before I started.
Is that Russian? Is that Russian?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
And that's why I know stuff other people don't know, because I read Russian. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And do you also get information directly from Ukraine?
Not very much. I mention Ukraine because RIA Novosti gets its information from Ukraine, from the Ministry of Electronic Transformation or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
But you also publish information with, I mean, everybody from Zelensky's office to the Ministry of Defense to other Ukrainian outlets, also reporting and confirming these strikes. Um, so is all of that coming from RIA Novosti?
no, there are several publications. My favorite news publication right now is Tsargrad, which really meant Constantinople at one time. Tsargrad. It's the Grad means city. The Tsar, the Tsar, it's a Tsar's city, Constantinople. That's the name of the publication, and it's written by a guy who is a very devout believer in Orthodoxy. He's not quite on track with Putin, but he respects Putin and he respects his decisions.
Uh,
It's very interesting.
so tell me about the missile airstrikes. In your reporting, you claim, you state, and I believe it because I get confirmation of this as well. Um, is is Russia really doing that many strikes, and are they not running out of missiles?
Well, we're supposed to believe they're running out of missiles, and if you say you don't think they do, then you're not a good American. But they started saying that back in March. They said Russia's running out of missiles. No, they're not going to win this war. Nah, they can't win. And so I took the first opportunity to prove that that was wrong, and I waited until October 10 when they started doing these daily strikes. And I don't know where I got the idea to start looking for the daily strikes, but it was easy because RIA Novosti carried that. But nowadays, I can't rely on RIA Novosti. They don't even tell you sometimes where the strikes hit. And I don't know why, but I had to go to military sites now. And even once in a while to a Ukrainian site. I don't read Ukrainian, by the way. I don't speak it or anything. And find out which military sites were hit. And it's really interesting because, well, you know, because you've been reading it. We've been striking whole vast hordes of troops, generals, mercenaries, all holed up in different places, and they aren't where they're supposed to be. You don't hit barracks anymore. Nobody puts them in barracks because they get killed. But they put them somewhere else, and then they still get killed because Russia has a wonderful, you could say, stable of spies, because a lot of people sympathize with Russia.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt that, and you don't even have to call them spies, but they're pro-Russian or maybe even Russian origin,
Yeah.
who are funneling information in one way or another
Mm-hmm.
about troop placements, where ammunition dumps are. But here's something I want your comments on. Ukraine and the United States are always saying the opposite of what's really happening. And in this case, Russia is attacking civilians in civilian
Yeah.
populations,
Well,
civilian buildings and
Putin hates
schools.
civilians. Putin hates civilians. Wherever he goes, he's going to kill civilians. You know that.
Yeah.
A civilian kicked sand in his face one time down at the beach. So now he hates civilians.
So let me ask you this: based on your information, with all of these missile strikes, Ukraine is saying that they're hitting civilians. Why is there even a margin of possibility that civilians are being hit with these missile strikes or drone strikes or whatever?
It is collateral damage, and some are being hit, but not very many. What's going on is that every time missiles are fired into Ukraine, in some big city, an air defense system, sometimes one of the older Soviet ones like the S-200, S-300, or even a Patriot system like in Kiev, will be targeted, and then that system fires rockets or whatever you want to call them to intercept the missile, and they almost always miss. But Russia usually sends in drones. And by the way, some of these missile strikes that I'm reporting are probably drones. Some of them, because the Russians also use drones. But these missiles from the air defenses will miss the target, typically, and then they'll fall on. They're in big cities, so where are they going to fall? They're going to fall on a civilian infrastructure, and they destroy things. And immediately, what do you suppose the Kiev press says? We know because remember the two Polish farm workers who were killed? And Zelensky said right away, without even knowing, and then he didn't have time to even pick up the phone and say, who did it? No, that was a Russian missile that deliberately targeted two Polish farm workers because Putin hates farm workers. Or so we are supposed to believe. And that very same day, because what he wanted us to do, of course, was to invoke Article 5 and start a world war by involving Poland. Poland was hit. That's a NATO country. Article 5. We're at war with everybody now. And of course, everybody was scared out of their mind. Biden was scared. President Duda of Poland was scared. And of course, Jens Stoltenberg was part of that group. All three of them immediately, very, very shortly after, they launched an investigation. I don't know if it was really an investigation or they just said it was, because they didn't want Zelensky to get his way. They didn't want World War III. And all three of them came out later and said that was not a Russian missile. It was a Ukrainian missile that missed its target. It was an air defense missile. And they would say that every time if it weren't for the fact that they want to give Russia a bad reputation.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'm well aware of, and a lot of people are, is that the reason for this very slow Russian special military operation has been to avoid killing civilians and destroying a hell of a lot more Ukrainian infrastructure. I mean, this is very well known. And a lot of people saying Russia's weak, they're timid, they're indecisive, they're confused. But what has been happening with the missile strikes and the drone strikes is they are on locations like schools and hospitals and factories that are actually the barracks for Ukrainian military and mercenaries and foreign personnel. And it's also well known that they hide their howitzers, they hide their HIMARS missile launchers in between apartment buildings. They move them when they fire, then they put them back. Russia knows this.
Mhm.
And I have asked this question to many people in Russia, experts, on why Russia cannot just wipe this out. And the answer is the Ukrainians and the mercenaries are embedded among civilians, using them as shields.
Mhm.
And and this is why at times there are people that will civilians that will lose their lives. Now, I want to ask you this, and I just alluded to it a minute ago. Do you think Russia must be running out of missiles and artillery
Well,
shells?
no, Russia has. I think I read once that they have the capacity of 3 times the capacity of America for producing all sorts of weapons. That's why in Bakhmut it became known that the uh, Ukrainians were losing 10 times as many troops as Russians because they had shells. The Russians had shells, and they didn't have shells.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I've reported on, and I've talked to a friend here who's an expert on Russian military affairs, all things nuclear, Russian military production and science. And it's been confirmed by others that Russia is 10 to 15 years ahead of the United States and anybody in the West in the development of the latest military offensive and defensive capabilities. 10 to 15 years.
Hmm.
The United States will not catch up to the hypersonic missiles that Russia has had now for several years.
Yeah.
And they're now saying, well, we're going to start working on it. Well, geez, by the time they start working on it, if they're still alive and around, Russia will already have advanced beyond that.
Mhm.
That's that's what's happening in terms of military hardware, military technology. The United the United States is so far behind uh, where Russia is at, and that's the reason I think why the United States is going to receive another very embarrassing blow very
Mhm.
soon in Ukraine. Uh,
Afghanistan 202.
yeah, they just had Afghanistan. Now it's like, and I think they're already looking for an exit ramp. Let's talk about the narrative that's changing. Uh, I'm reading today reports from Washington Post, Politico, Newsweek, all reporting that there's dissension and a split and conflict in the White House and between the White House and the Pentagon. And I know for a fact that within the Pentagon or the United States military, the people that are below colonel have lost trust and faith in the command.
Hmm.
Morale is terribly bad. When they pulled out of Afghanistan, those thousands and thousands of our kids that were there, many died, many had friends who died, were so angry when Biden pulled the United States completely out of there the way he did that they have lost faith in him, the White House, and the senior command. And now they see a similar thing happening in Ukraine.
Hmm.
They know they've been lied to.
Hmm.
So, what do you think it means, Dawn, that publications like America's Bible, the New York Times, the Washington Post, uh, Newsweek, Politico, the Guardian in UK are now beginning to show cracks in the narrative. The Those people manipulated and even are becoming skeptical now and are even beginning to report about it. What do
Hmm.
you think this means that the narrative is changing?
It means they're sick of Biden. The Democrats even are sick of Biden. That means that's one of the things it means. It also means that the Americans are speaking out in polls and saying they aren't for this war. They don't want to. Probably the majority today of Americans do not want to see their weapons sent to Ukraine.
Yeah, I've been seeing the same poll results that Trump for one is outpacing Biden by a great deal, and whoever the rest of the competitors are, in spite of the fact that they're trying like all hell to discredit Trump before the election. They're terribly afraid of him, but in terms of what's happening in the United States, and my father always said, Americans vote with their pocketbook.
Mm.
And under the Biden administration, there's no way that they can claim really any positive stories, positive successes they've had on the economy. All the banks have said we're close to recession. Recently, I just read where the major banks, their credit rating is being downgraded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a few months ago, we read where several of the major lenders had folded, were bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Americans know inflation is there, unemployment is there,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't call employment at a Starbucks or a smartphone kiosk in a mall as a living wage, or even driving a cab.
Really?
Yeah, and so I think neither one of us are living there right now, but we have friends there that we talk to all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and life is very difficult. I just read where Americans are now more in debt, credit card debt, than ever.
Yeah, yeah.
And the reason for that is because they don't have enough money to buy what they basically need. They're living in a consumer society, but they can't keep it up. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you put these things together, I think many Americans now, their eyes are being opened, and they're even moving from being skeptical to now starting to speak out and complain and protest. We're seeing that around the country. I have friends in Maine who have been conducting these protests against the war, against the defense budget, against what's happening in the country, because they're not spending money to develop the country, to take care of people. They've been doing this every month, and the protests are growing and growing and growing. And it's not just happening there, it's happening around the country and around the world. I can only hope that the cracks continue to widen and increase,
Mm-hmm.
because maybe it can at least bring a temporary end to this insanity. Don, I want to ask you one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
Why the heck are you living in Panama? I get this question asked all the time. Why are you living in Russia?
Yeah. You should ask me why I don't live in Crimea. Because I don't know. I wish I could go. I'd love to live there. But Panama is a pretty nice country in the respect that people here don't get bogged down in political debate or anything. If I tell them I like Putin, they say, "Oh, okay, yeah, whatever." They don't care. So I really like the Panamanians, but my wife is Panamanian, and that's really why we came down, because her mother got sick with cancer, and my wife wanted to take care of her.
Yeah,
And then we just stayed.
yeah, yeah. In my case, I couldn't live there anymore. I do not even recognize the country that I was born in. I don't recognize it at all.
Yeah.
And I think today, if I were being bombarded with all the negativity, all the social and civic problems, and uh, ethnic problems, migration problems, crime,
Mhm.
etc., I
Mhm.
I just I couldn't do it. I think I probably would have died a couple of years ago of a heart attack just because of the built up, pent up frustration and anger, and being a dissident. I probably might have ended up in jail.
Yeah.
I want to encourage everybody to subscribe to your Substack channel. Do you know offhand what it is? Can you relate what?
Okay, it's the first part is Don Hank, DONHANK, period. Substack, all one word, .com. And that'll get you there.
Right, terrific. I'm going to post that. And once again, I want to encourage everyone who's interested to read the articles that you post every day. But if they want to know what's going on in Ukraine, they should read your reports on the daily missile strikes.
Mm-hmm.
Don, I want to thank you very much. You're providing an incredible service to people who want to know what's happening in Ukraine. I don't know of anybody else who's doing it. Thanks so much again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.